Evolution has led us where we are today, and it has also decided our future from now. Things have changed, and there are a lot of things that are continuously changing. Some of us work from India for high-tech capital cities across the globe, whereas others are traveling from work for their small cities to the metro cities. But what needs to be done to understand the challenges, demands, and opportunities of blue-collar workers from the non-metro cities? Hello and welcome. I'm Abid Hassan, and you're watching me on ETHRWorld. And thank you for tuning to this offbeat webinar. And today we are going to discuss on the topic evolution of blue-collar jobs in the non-metro cities. I'm happy to announce that I have been joined by two eminent guests for this webinar. My first guest is Praveen Agarwala, co-founder and CEO of BetterPlace Safety Solutions. Welcome to the show, Praveen.
Thanks, Abid, for having me here. Looking forward to speaking to you.
Thanks a lot. A short introduction to Praveen. With an experience of more than 2 decades, Praveen has strong expertise in cloud strategy, CRM, and people management. He's currently an investor and advisor in several tech startups. At BetterPlace, Praveen works with the team to define the future of work, the blue-collar ecosystem, the vision of the company, the product roadmap, and how to make the customers happy and successful. My next guest is Sandeep Sethi, Managing Director, JLL Work Dynamics, West Asia. Welcome, Sandeep.
Thanks, Abid.
Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. A short introduction to Sandeep as well. Sandeep is responsible for providing strategic direction to the business and focuses on strengthening client relationships and new businesses and ensuring excellence in service delivery. He is a keen advocate of skill development, diversity and inclusion, technology applications in real estate and sustainability. Having trained as a mechanical engineer, Sandeep has over 25 years of experience in the corporate sector and had held diverse set of roles ranging from general management to strategic leadership. Thank you both of you for joining us here. And I would like to thank all the audience for joining us. And I would like to say that this is a Q&A, and after this Q&A, we will be opening the floor for questions. Please ping your questions in the Q&A tab, and our guests will take your questions. So without any further ado, I would like to ask Sandeep. Sandeep, my very basic and first question to you. All the leading sectors are bullish about the non-metro cities because, I have heard this quote long back, decade back, that regional is the new national. So in the long run, what do you think the non-metro cities, how good is the ROI? What potential do you see for the employers and employees in these cities? And what does the future look like? What are your thoughts?
So, Abid, I'll take a shot at that. It's a very good question. And I'm sure we all have our views and opinions. Let me share with you mine. If you look at the number of people that are in the workforce in India today, it's about 500 million or so. And a big chunk of them work in the not so formalized part of the economy. But most of these workers end up getting jobs in the large metro cities. But in the last few years, thanks to technology and as a result of the pandemic as well, we've seen a few trends. We've seen more digitization. We've seen the advent of the gig economy. We've also seen reverse migration to some extent. If you look at the corporate sector, for example, almost 40-50% of the employees, if not more in many cases, that work for large IT companies or even banks and few other sectors, they've gone back to their hometowns. And they're actually very comfortable there because they're getting paid like they were getting paid in tier 1 as well. And they're enjoying the luxuries of working from home. And many of them don't want to go back to the metros. As a result of that, and also plus the fact that we are in a tight labor market today for both white-collar and blue-collar workers, a lot of corporates are now willing to take the offices to tier 2 cities, which means the whole ecosystem around an office will need to evolve around tier 2 cities or in tier 2 cities as well. You can imagine the number of services that are dependent or that thrive on an office complex are immense. So it creates a lot of job openings. At the same time, we have a population in tier 2 that has more disposable income, that has aspirations, and that has a young population. And they obviously want to have a better quality of life as well. So you look at what's happening with retail malls, for example, the more and more number of new retail malls are being constructed in tier 2, tier 3 cities as compared to large metropolitans. That obviously creates a whole new world of opportunities for professional skilled people as well as low skilled people. So the entire ecosystem thrives. We're starting to see a big focus on manufacturing as well. This is Prime Minister Modi's agenda. And manufacturing companies typically thrive in not tier 1 cities, but tier 2, tier 3 cities because the cost of land, labor, etc. is cheaper. You look at what's happening with industrial, warehousing, logistic type setup. Again, big expansion into tier 2, tier 3. So net, you look at different asset classes, different sectors or industries. There is a value proposition to go to tier 2, tier 3 cities. So I feel that the outlook is very positive. The runway is long, and what we're seeing today is just the start of the journey. That is not going to be easy, but it's going to be rewarding, and that's good for the country. Also, it helps create employment opportunities to a big segment of India that traditionally had to travel out of their hometowns to be employed. At the same time, it helps with decongesting our cities. So it's a win-win situation.
Very important point that they don't have to travel all the way to metro cities for work, and the cost of labor and the cost of land is less. So it's a good chance of ROI. Coming to Praveen, since BetterPlace is empowering gig workers and also enhancing the gig job market, I would like to ask you, what is the status of the current gig job market in the non-metros in competition to the metros? That is one. And what role technology can play in enhancing the market demand?
So, unfortunately, Abid, if you can go on mute, I think there's some kind of echo. Hopefully it's better now. So, like Sandeep mentioned, I think technology plays a huge role in terms of how the changes are happening. Take this example of the growth of e-commerce and logistics itself, right? Now, all these companies started in metro cities, in Bangalore and Delhi and Mumbai and so on. And now they're able to scale it up across multiple cities across the country, right? Some of these companies are present in 500 cities or might be in 10,000 plus pin codes. Now that is possible because there is a scale that is coming due to technology. Now that's the growth of those companies. But at the same time, now you have to ensure that you are able to meet that growth from employment and gig models and so on. You cannot do that in person, right? You cannot have 500 city locations with 500 HR people sitting in every location and trying to find out the right match, right skill. You cannot manage that in every location geographically, right? And people also used to shy away from expanding because if you expand, you have to also manage it in a very efficient manner, right? Now, technology empowers you to do that, right? Be it onboarding of your resource, be it identifying the right resource, be it upskilling of your resource. So being in Bangalore or in Delhi or in any part of the world or the country for that matter, you can actually manage your workforce remotely, starting from identification of the resource till the exit of the resource, which makes things very, very scalable and efficient as well, right? That's one part that happens. The second thing which is also changing, and Sandeep touched upon that as well, is post-pandemic, largely, the adoption of technology in every sector has gone up, right? Be it the traditionals like facility management or security or manufacturing and others, including the new age, of course. But individuals have also started using it more and more. Let's say 2 years back or 3 years back, if I'm looking for a job as a frontline workforce, I will go to a place and look for a job, right? I'll walk into somebody's office or somewhere. Today, I don't do that, right? I know that I can find the relevant things on my mobile and I can get the job done. My payments can happen on my mobile. I don't have to really look for where the employer is. I can trust the system completely that if I do the job, my salary will come into my account. No fraud will happen. The trust level has also increased on the technology, right? Otherwise, people will worry that I've done the job, who will pay me? Today, that is not there, right? And that is actually building the ecosystem which will take us forward, right? In future, you will find that most of frontline workforce might be they never see each other in office kind of environment. They just do their job, go back home, they do as they want to do. And I believe that really adds to the value that we want to see going forward.
My question to you is, Praveen, gig workers see a lot of, women's participation as well, especially in the rural areas. Do you think instating flexible working policies and gender-specific policies will help the companies to accommodate more women in the gig workforce? I'm talking about the non-metro cities, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, Abid, overall, if you think from an ESG point of view as well, which is your environment, social, and governance. How do we ensure there is more empowerment given, there is more balance from a gender perspective? It is not only from the perspective of only women, but it's also transgenders in a larger scheme of things that we have to look into, right? Typically, what happens is that if you look at a metro city, then it's largely migration pattern. The people come from the villages or some states like Assam, Odisha, Bihar, and others, and work in these metro cities. And most of the women actually shy away from that kind of migration until unless it's within the city or nearby towns, right? So I can move from Ramnagaram to Bangalore, or Mysore to Bangalore, or Nasik to Bombay, and things like that, but not really from the parts. Besides certain areas like Northeast, there are more people moving for that region. As we move towards the tier 2, tier 3 cities, I think the opportunity is increasing for them because it's closer to the home. They feel the safety net, the environment is known to them. They find that opportunity. The flexibility also becomes important, that do I do it in the morning shift or the night shift? And given the ESG mandate, and every company, especially companies who are growing or growth stage, they are taking this very, very seriously, right? There are companies who are saying that we will move from a percent of women workforce to 10% or 15% workforce in next 2 years to 5 years time frame, and so on. I think there is a lot of push around it. What is required right now is creating that kind of awareness that there is an opportunity. And if you take the job could be around you, and there is absolute safety around it. You don't have to worry about anything. Third is that the skill level which are required to perform those jobs, right? Be it in retail, be it in facility, be it in BFSI, those skills perhaps are not there today. So how do we upskill them, right? We are just running a program where we'll be announcing it in 2 weeks from now. So I do not want to preempt it right now, but this is one initiative that we will be driving very, very aggressively, right? What is also important, which is the last thing, is that as a family, they also want to do it, right? If you see, actually in the informal sector, there are more women than men, perhaps, right? Be it manufacturing, be it domestic help, and so on. So people are forthcoming that I want to do something. It's just that opportunity has to be matched in the right way for them.
Definitely very, very important and crucial points to mention about, the work safety, the time, the environment is known to them. So these are the points that need to be taken care of from the employers and especially the employees. Thank you so much, Praveen. And coming back to Sandeep. Sandeep, my question to you was with employment generation in tier 1 and tier 2 cities. What are your thoughts on reverse migration? Is it a good sign or a wake-up call? And also, what are your thoughts on what challenges or opportunities do you see for the companies where the returning employees are coming back to the office? Over to you.
Apologies for that break in communication a few minutes ago. Murphy's Law, it was working fine all along, and just when I had to speak, it just dropped. I hope it doesn't happen again. If it does, my apologies in advance. So look, any change that's planned is always better for everyone, for employees and for employers. The reverse migration that we saw when the pandemic started was unplanned, and it was obviously very, very difficult for the employees, for the migrant workers, because they went back home in very harsh conditions. They didn't have jobs when they went back home. The government schemes like Manrega couldn't carry them beyond a point, so they had to even eventually come back to the tier one cities. Then, when the pandemic situation started to improve, we saw a reverse migration of white collar jobs, but that was for a different reason. It wasn't planned, but at the same time, they had the salaries. They went back by their own choice. No one forced them to go back. But when you just focus on blue collar workers, I think reverse migration is good for them as long as there's something back in the remote or in the tier two cities where they come from, or tier three cities where they come from. In the absence of which, it puts unnecessary burden on them and on the system as well. So what we need to do is, as a country, we need to make sure that we bring in the infrastructure, we bring in the jobs in the remote parts of the country so that we can plan for reverse migration. Obviously, the entire ecosystem has to come together. It's not just the employers, it's not just obviously the end users or the employees in this case, but it's the entire public or the state. Things happen. In the case of employees that work in large corporations, to your second part of the question, it has been a double-edged sword. The companies actually want to bring employees back because they feel it's very hard to sustain collaboration, innovation, product development in a very virtual format or in a virtual world. So they need employees to come back and be together in a physical location to make all that happen. But employees, like I said earlier, also they're comfortable working from remote places, they're comfortable being in their hometowns, and they have 2-3 job opportunities in hand because the labor market is so tight today for white collar jobs, especially, that they're not coming back. Many of them choose to leave the organization instead of just continuing and having to move back to tier one cities. Now that puts a lot of pressure on organizations, obviously, and hence I said earlier that they're moving offices back to they're moving offices to tier two cities to be closer to the employees. But that's not a sustainable solution as well, because again, the entire ecosystem needs to mature. So what they're doing is a stopgap arrangement. It'll probably help the situation for next 1 to 3 years, but that's not a solution that will solve the problem from a long-term perspective. I do personally feel reverse migration is for the right reasons at the right time is a fantastic thing. It helps everyone, like I mentioned earlier also. But there's a lot of things that need to happen before we get to that stage.
So the takeaway is ecosystem needs to mature, right? Okay, thank you so much for highlighting different aspects of these two questions. I'll come back to Praveen. Praveen, you mentioned about skill development, and especially in the rural areas. And so skill shortage in rural areas is much wider, in urban centers than urban centers in compared to. How do you see this as a challenge, and what needs to be done, and how should companies address this shortage?
Yeah, so Abid, overall, I think from hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So Abid, overall, from a skilling point of view, I think the challenge is not only in rural or tier 2, tier 3 cities, but it's also in tier 1 cities, right? If you look at overall population of frontline workforce, the blue collar workforce, only 3% of the population is formally skilled, right? Rest is not. And it remains a challenge. On one hand, if you see, companies say that I have a huge demand and I'm not able to meet the number of people that I need, be it in manufacturing, be it in logistics, be it in BFSI or wherever, right? There is always a shortage of resources. On the other hand, you ask people, then they will always say that I don't have enough opportunities or I don't have the right job right now, right? So it's also an issue of skill besides geolocation and finding the job in their own perimeter or periphery or cities and so on. So there are multiple other reasons as well, but skill becomes one of the critical aspects overall, right? What companies need to do, I mean, there are a lot of initiatives being run, and Sandeep can add, he runs one of the programs along with NSDC as part of the Sector Skill Council. But there are multiple different programs being run by government, by NSDC, by state missions to skill up people. But I think that's not sufficient in my honest opinion, right? What needs to be done is an ecosystem where employers are coming together and building a skill program and creating a resource pool of people who are deployable, who are skilled enough to take a particular job as and when they want, right? So for example, if I am, let's say, an Asian paint, I have might be 5 lakh people trained on how to use Asian paints as a product and become a painter. And whenever there is a demand, they are readily available, right? Or if I, for example, want to be a smart new age security guard or a facility person, which Sandeep is driving, how do I ensure that the population is already available? And this is irrespective of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I think tier 1, there is still more focus because you have more demand, so people are doing something or the other. But in tier 2 and tier 3, we need more concentrated effort. In my view, what would be a right thing to do is a joint effort. At least I can talk about BetterPlace. We have created a rocket as a program where we partner with companies, train people at no cost, upskill them where they can find the right opportunities for themselves, and organizations have people to look for, right, whenever they want, and there is no obligation. So I have 5 options because I have taken multiple skills. And the second thing that I would like to add on to that is that it's not only one-time skilling of people, right? I also need to have a career path. If I have joined as a guard, how can I become a supervisor? If I have joined as a delivery boy, how can I become a warehouse manager? If I have joined in hospitality as, let's say, a frontline service provider, how can I become a frontline desk manager and things like that, right? There is a career path which is also required, and we have to continuously skill them up besides the changes which are happening in the businesses as well.
So we need to evolve, otherwise we'll become stagnant. That's what you're saying. That is one.
Yeah, I think India's future problem from labor would be not availability of resources, is the availability of skilled resources, in my view.
Exactly. So a lot of CEOs are having sleepless nights because their employees are not skilled enough. They need to upskill themselves. I'm sure Praveen is not one of the CEOs who are having sleepless nights because of the skilling problem. Okay, coming to Sandeep. Praveen mentioned about the NSGC part, what you were doing, what program you're doing. You would like to add something, or should I ask you a different question?
Sure, happy to. So the Sector Skill Councils that works with the NSTC is a Sector Skill Council that focuses on tourism, hospitality, and facilities management. And I'm part of that Sector Skill Council from the standpoint of being on the governing board for them. What we try and do is we create skilling opportunities for people who want to enter into these sectors. At the same time, we work on demand aggregation. So constantly we're driving towards ensuring that we match the skilled resources with the folks who want to employ them. And Praveen is absolutely right. The issue is not so much of employment as much as it's about employability. And we always see that in the world that we live in today, which is very dynamic, the skills need to keep evolving as well. Some of the skills that we need today in the industries I mentioned, they probably were irrelevant or didn't even exist in terms of requirements 3-4 years ago. So it is important to make sure that we are that the skilling agencies are aligned, which means they have to constantly get the data from the demand side. They have to constantly tweak their curriculum, and they have to make sure that the expectations are set right. A lot of times we train people, but they refuse to take up the opportunities when they come to them, because the ground reality in terms of what the job entails is very different from what they thought or what they were trained for. So this is going to get even more ambiguous and complex as time goes by, because the world is changing with digitization and the reverse migration discussion we're happening. We will require different skills, different curriculum, and a constant dialogue between the two sides, like I mentioned before.
Okay, I quote one survey. I was going through this survey, and it said the job conversion ratio has been falling by a significant measure in tier 2 cities. And the experts believe that falling in private consumption and declaration in government consumption spending are the primary reasons for the same. So, being an expert, what do you think? What needs to be done to rebuild this market, and what your organization is doing to control the damage? Anything that you would like to highlight?
Since you said being an expert, assuming that question was the expert, you want to take that, Praveen?
You both are experts, by the way.
I thought the question was to you, Sandeep.
Okay.
But just to add my comment, again, as I said, that I do not see there is a huge issue with the demand right now, more than the ensuring that the right employability is managed. And might be the other problem is that it's a skewed demand, right? The demand might be heavy in Bangalore, for example, and the supply is very high in Kanpur or somewhere in Dibrugarh in Assam, right? So how do you also ensure that that is matched, right? Or demand is more well spread, right? There are certain states where they are heavily dependent on agriculture, and that's a very seasonal demand. Then they are not getting enough job. For example, in Assam or Orissa, there are not local enough jobs for people. They have to migrate, look for opportunities. How do we create that kind of thing? I think few of the things which are definitely helping is the infrastructure development, which the government is pushing very hard. So a lot more local jobs are getting created. Second is that the expansion of the new age economy across the country, that is also helping the local demand. And as the economy builds, there is more money to spend, the economy will come back. I do not see right now that as the issue over at least in our world that we are observing.
And I agree with Praveen. Let me add to that. Look, I don't personally think that there's a conversion issue. It is about getting the ecosystem to mature and align. It is about employability. And this is a very dynamic situation. It's like a moving goalpost. You have to run and tie your shoelaces at the same time, figuratively. So, but it can be addressed. If you look at India, right, 500 million people go to work, a big chunk of them in agriculture. But look at the other sectors that employ a big chunk of the people. It's construction and real estate, it's retail, it's manufacturing, it's industrial logistics, warehousing, etc. If you look at the opportunity that digitization has created, it's created the whole concept of gig economy, gig worker. Only 5-6 million people from a blue-collar worker perspective participate in that gig economy today. But the potential, there was a BCG report recently which said the potential is to take it to 90 million people. That's a lot of people. And half of those people are going to come from these 4 sectors I mentioned. In all these sectors, construction, retail, manufacturing, industrial, warehousing, and retail as well, like I said earlier in my response to the first question, they're moving to tier 2, tier 3, and even beyond. So there is going to be a huge demand. But obviously, we've got to make sure, again, back to my original point, the ecosystem has to evolve, which means what do the workers expect? The workers expect predictability, which means if I'm a worker, if I'm a gig worker, I want to make sure that I'll keep getting the jobs. I want to be paid on time. I want financial inclusion. And if I'm an end user, a customer, or even an employer, what do I expect? I expect my employees to have good background verification. I expect my employees or my service providers to have the right skills. I expect them to be available. Now, it is a catch-22. If I'm a service provider, I will be available as long as there's enough jobs. Otherwise, I'll move on to something else. So it will go through a rough patch because it is a scale business. In tier 1 cities, there's cities like Delhi, etc. We have so many people, 20 million population. There's always going to be a job. There's always going to be predictability in terms of a service provider getting a call. In a city with 1 million people, it's going to be tough initially. So that it will eventually smoothen out. But I feel there's no shortage, there's no conversion ratio issue. It's the ecosystem, and it's to do with what Praveen mentioned around employability.
Thank you for sharing this in detail. So I have another question. You mentioned, I'll come back to Praveen. This crisis, it has changed a lot in terms of way we live, terms of way, the way we work, the way we meet people, everything. So I would like to, understand from your thought, your experience, how this crisis has changed the concept of gig workplace and even the mindset of gig workers or frontline workers. Do you think organizations should create a new framework, for non-metro employees, because most of the gig employees are from non-metro cities? Do you think organizations should do that, can do that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, and Sandeep can add because he experiences more people on a management every day. But overall, if you see, certain paradigms have shifted, right? For example, when I used to work earlier as a gig person, I just come do my job, go back home. Now there are needs which needs to be satisfied. For example, what will happen if my health is not taken care of, right? What will happen if my stay is not as hygienic as it's required? So people are becoming more and more, I would say, aware of the needs around those kind of benefits. People are also getting more aware about financial inclusion, like Sandeep added, right? If there is a calamity, then how do I save money? How do I utilize my money? How do I have access to capital when I need it, credit, and so on and so forth, right? Which was perhaps kind of in the air, but not really a demand or a need at that moment. That it's a nice to have to a must have kind of thing. It has changed, right? What has also changed is that while we talk about gig a bit all the time, and the world is moving towards that, one of the things that people have also become very, very, I would say, it's a very touchy thing for them is stability of income as well, right? If I'm working somewhere, can I predict my income for the month, right? Because if something goes wrong tomorrow, let's say lockdown happens, what will happen? Because if I lose a month's salary, I'm hand to mouth, right? What will happen to my family and so on? So that stability of income is also very, very critical, right? So people have also started, and that could actually be a positive thing for gig as well, that if I am doing one job, can I have part-time another opportunity, right? For example, I do, let's say, a security guard job in the morning, and evening might be I'm doing a driver or a delivery boy job, or I am a driver and delivery boy job in one company in the morning, and evening I do with another company. So I look at options, and the system has to empower people now so that they have more choices, they have more options, they have stability of income, and perhaps more income per hour as well, right? And that is what I think is changing. And organizations are also very forthcoming in that, right? It's not only, earlier might be there was a view that, oh, it's my employee and should always stay my employee. People have moved from that this is the task that needs to be done, do my task, and you are free man, right? And I think that is a positive sign towards the new world that I foresee.
If I can just add to what Praveen said,
please go ahead.
Look, the gig economy in a way existed forever.
Yeah.
It just wasn't tech enabled. People did work in on-demand type roles forever, in India especially. More in emerging markets than in developed markets. But they used not technology, but they used personal networks, they used word of mouth to get jobs. And we saw that in at our homes as well. Whenever you brought in a plumber, that's a gig economy. Whenever you had a maid who came in, for example, that's a gig economy. We saw that in so many sectors. But technology has brought in advantages. The platforms that we see for Ola, Uber, Swiggy, etc., they brought in transparency. They brought in various aspects that protect worker rights. That's great, and that's wonderful for the blue-collar workers. I feel the future is only going to create win-win situations. So everything that Praveen said is actually bang on. And I think technology is going to address a lot of the concerns that exist. But of course, we need a tighter regulatory framework to make sure that um, there's no ambiguity in terms of the responsibilities that organizations have. Sometimes organizations find loopholes in terms of the responsibilities because of the way the worker is classified. So the worker right protection is absolutely of utmost importance. You see a lot of developed economies bringing in new legislation around what those responsibilities are. I think that will happen. It's a matter of time. It's starting to happen in India. It will happen even faster going forward, which is a good thing.
Okay, great. And your last answer, you mentioned about financial security. You mentioned about money, Sandeep. So this is, financial security is another matter of concern for gig workers, be it metro, be it non-metro. How is this? But I would like you to highlight, how is this different in the non-metro cities? Are people more scared? Are we heading towards any solution for this? This will stay as one of the major roadblocks for workers and employers. What do you think?
Look, financial security is important for everyone, white collar workers, blue collar workers, but obviously the blue collar workers, they are the lower income group. So it hurts them a lot more when there's no financial security. But it's not just financial security. Financial inclusion is the other side of the coin. I think they both go hand in hand and both have to be addressed. Like Praveen said, and like I said before as well, that the biggest need for a gig worker, especially a blue collar worker, is predictability, which means to make sure I will get an opportunity to make income as much as I expect, and I will get paid on time. Because I plan my cash flow around it. And I'm a primary, even if I'm a secondary contributor to the household income, that income that I generate is so important, in the absence of which things will fall apart. So that becomes absolutely important. And like I said before, it's a bigger problem to some extent in tier 2 than in tier 1 because of the scale. So if I'm a delivery boy and I deliver food for Swiggy, for example, I know in a city like Delhi, where there are 25 million people, I'll be on the road a lot. But if I'm in a small city with 1 million people or even less, then there may not be so many orders. It's an obvious mathematical conclusion, right? So I might have to offset that or compromise. I may have to offset that by picking up 2-3 jobs. But it brings in that insecurity. But the financial inclusion part is also important. If I work in this segment, will I be having benefits like access to loans, for example? Will I get will I be able to participate in welfare programs from the government? Again, it depends on the government regulations. It depends on how certain jobs are classified as well. And that's the part of the ecosystem or the regulatory framework that I was referring to. But I do feel both have to move hand in hand. The good thing is, with technology, the first part can bring in a lot more transparency. There's, to some level, employers have a lot of predictability based on algorithmic exercises they can do with the data, and they can set the right expectations. I wouldn't say to someone that you'll get 25 orders, given that my historical data says that there's a possibility of only 10 orders max a day. Right? So I can set the right expectations, and that way there's less room for disappointment as well.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I think we have a lot of audience questions as well. So I have 2 quick questions. One for Praveen. With the lessons of 2020 instilled in all of us, do you think gig workers are even better equipped to take on the challenges that lie before them?
Absolutely. I think 2020 April, it was a nightmare. People had no clue what to do, how to do. I think people are absolutely ready now to face any kind of challenges, whatever that may be. They have much better SOP. We had accepted that or expected that nothing will create a problem or there won't be any disaster for us, right? Things have changed. People have realized how to react, and I would say that any wave of anything that comes, everyone knows how to handle that right now.
Okay, and Sandeep, where do you see the future of non-metro women frontline workers in India? Very quickly.
I think it's a good story there. A lot of runway. In the last 6 months, I read a report recently which said that just in 4 or 5 top platforms, 250,000 women applied for jobs. There are a lot more women applying today for part-time jobs as compared to full-time jobs. So I think the gig economy that's tech-enabled has allowed a lot more people to enter the workforce. And that applies to that. That's a great thing, especially for women, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities, where less women enter the workforce. Now they can be at home if they choose to and participate in the working economy. So I think it's great. And as this catches on, there'll be more and more jobs. Like I said, the opportunity that the BCT report suggested, indicated is 5 million gig jobs moving to 90 million jobs. And I'm hoping that a majority of the jobs go to women because, the multiplier effect on the lifestyle, on children's education, economy, etc., is many folds as compared to when men enter the economy.
Absolutely.
So,
And there are certain sectors actually, like retail, like manufacturing, where the productivity is much higher. And being honest on that front, and not biased, when there's a woman, there is a productivity is much higher because of the discipline they bring in and all those things which we have seen as well.
okay, yes, you're not biased. You are actually honest, and you're saying the truth because you've seen it. How I'm I think next month it's Mother's Day, and how working mother or even non-working mother, how they manage things, how the productivity is good. So very honest on that part, Praveen. So I'll come to the Q&A. The first question is from Rajiv Ranjan. Rajiv is asking, industrial training institutes play a major role in skill development. These institutes needs an yearly audit in terms of their output, and a skill set database is required to be maintained to find the right talent. Your views on the same. How do we address the issue of skill shortage? You want me to repeat the question?
No, I get it. I think it's the same. It's not specific to ITIs. It's for example, any institute for that matter, right? You do engineering, you join a software company, you realize that you have to spend 6 months to learn something new to start being productive in that specific company, right? There are ITIs who are working very closely with the organizations, be it hospitality, be it manufacturing, so they're ready to be hired. But of course, there could be more partnership, in my view, between organizations and institutes, where perhaps the last year is fully focused on the jobs that they can get into immediately, right? The employability quotient has to be much, much higher in my perspective, right? The second thing perhaps that can be done, and which is I really appreciate, is the apprentice program, which government has introduced, right? Where they can work directly with an organization for a year, and there is a win-win for the individual as well as for the organization. I think those programs needs to be scaled up or expedited much faster, in my perspective, to create value. And of course, I mean, there could be more standards across ITIs that you have to be at this level or minimum benchmark that can be defined. And that's applicable to not only ITIs, but any institute in the country for that matter.
If I can just take 30 seconds, I'll just add on.
Please add on.
Thanks, sir. We as an organization, JLL, we work a lot more with educational institutions today than ever before. And both ITIs as well as hotel management institutions, for example, we help them customize their curriculum. At the same time, we work with them on internship opportunities. So every year, many students spend 6 months with us, so that as part of the internship program, so that by the time they graduate, they have real world skills. And for us also, it creates a ready-made talent pool. So it really helps.
Okay, and the next question is from Prabha. Prabha is asking, what is the lead time for organization to work with skill council and to get the people trained so that they can do the job on day one?
Sandeep?
Yeah, Sandeep.
So, look, I think if the curriculum is aligned with your requirements, then it's a continuous process. The pool is available all the time because the trainings happen through the year, and they do so many road shows for placements uh, in different parts of the country, a lot in tier 2, tier 3 as well, that you don't have the question of lead time because it's a continuous thing.
Right.
Where the organizations can contribute a lot more is making sure the curriculum is aligned with the requirements. Because like I mentioned earlier, the requirements in the real world keep changing very fast, especially in today's world, and tomorrow it'll be worse. So often, going back to Praveen's point, it becomes a question of employability. So as long as there's alignment, it's a continuous process. There's no lead time issue.
Okay. Next question is from Sundar Viswanathan. Sundar is asking, remote working or hybrid, will remote working or hybrid way of working will ease out the availability of gig workers or service providers in selected areas? What do you think? And Praveen, this is for you.
So hybrid largely works in the white collar or the desk kind of jobs, right? I mean, if you look at a frontline of workforce, they do not have a concept of hybrid as such, right? They have to go to their work. It's be it manufacturing, be it facility, security, whatsoever, right? But what happens is that because of the hybrid model, right, a lot of people who are desk job have started working from their hometowns, right? And they are creating newer opportunity. For example, I was in Bangalore, let's say, I moved to Kanpur or Guwahati. I'm used to ordering online. I also order there, right? So I take this business from here to my other location. And that's where the business starts growing. That creates newer opportunity for people. But for the people itself, they do not have a concept of hybrid in my view. Might be I'm wrong, but that's how I see it in the industry.
I totally agree with that.
Okay. So Manoj Kumar is asking, you mentioned skewed demand and the need for continuous employment opportunities. How can industries work with NSDC or Sector Skill Council on skilling people on one or more skills to ensure continuous employment as a trade-off for employment closer home? I think, Praveen, you mentioned about skewed demand.
So it's the same point. It's the same point that Sandeep just added on to ITA as well. It's at the end of the day, organizations and the skill bodies, right? They have to work together, create the programs. What is also important is that I can forecast my demand as well, right? For example, let's say I need 1,000 plumbers in Bangalore. Then should I train 1,000 plumbers in and around Bangalore rather than training them somewhere in Odisha, for example, right? Or I need more people in manufacturing in Odisha. So how can I localize based on the demand and supply? I think that's the analytics that, or the AI that we have to bring in as a program as well. And if I can forecast, let's say 2 years kind of job opportunity that could come up, right? And how do I prepare myself, like Sandeep also mentioned, on a continuous skill basis, so you do not have a lead time, the system itself takes care of it, right? And that would be really nice from my perspective.
And just to add to that, I think it's important that most organizations, if not all organizations, should register with the sector skill councils so that they can help with the curriculum definition, they can sign up for the apprenticeship program as well, and they can help in predicting what the demand will be, and of course then help in the whole absorption of those people into the employment.
Or they can also register with BetterPlace and we will take care of everything.
Even better.
Yeah, that was a nice plug. Good one, Praveen. What are the top skills? I think Sundar is asking, I think the next question is, Sundar is again asking, what are the top skills that blue collar workers of rural areas need to equip with? I think all the leading skills, but anything specific that you would like to ask, share?
Look, I think getting comfortable with technology is absolutely going to be the most important skill. Get a smartphone and be comfortable with it. And that, honestly, that's not a problem today. Just about everyone has a smartphone, but just got to be comfortable. That's one for sure. with technology-enabled platforms, ratings play a big role in the person's ability to get more business or more calls. So you've got to have those work ethics that get you the next call. Otherwise, you not have the predictability and the repeatability that we talked about.
Get comfortable with the gadgets, right? This question is from DLN Reddy, and the question is for both of you. Can panelists tell how they take care of housing and transport of blue-collar workers?
Yeah, I mean, like transportation, there are companies who provide the facilities. There are organizations who are providing the facilities. What we are doing is that we have partnered with OEMs. We are providing electrical vehicles to individuals. For example, if you want to become, let's say, a delivery boy, and you have a driving license, but you do not have a bike, then we provide you the bike so that you can do it. So there are different things depending on your individual, like a delivery boy, or you have to move from place A to place B for your job. So there's transportation provided. From accommodation, I think there are a lot of new initiatives happening. I work with a company called Tikana as well. I support them, where we create hygiene spaces for people, right? We create spaces more like a dormitory where the cost is minimum, but the standards are very high, right? So that post-pandemic, this is one of the requirements as well. But there are organizations who are creating common living spaces, creating those facilities for people so that stay, food, accommodation does not become their worry all the time.
Okay. Mandar is asking now, I'll take two more questions. I think we have a lot of questions, but time limit is as well. So now COVID situation is much improved. Still, you think blue collar employees thinking for a better salary expectation and hygiene work area?
So look, I can speak in the context of the work that I do. One of the businesses one of the products for us is property and facilities management, which employs a lot of blue collar workers in areas of housekeeping, security, etc. And we work with commercial offices, work with residential complexes, malls, etc. And one thing I can say for sure is there is a growing sense of corporate responsibility with all the different stakeholders we work with. They want to make sure that everyone wants to be out of the line when it comes to statutory compliance, worker conditions, social issues, etc. I think the COVID situation has only increased that sensitivity because it's not just the employers, but it's also the end users. It could be people living in residential complexes or employees that go to work in an office or visitors in a retail mall. Everybody is sort of being emotionally moved by what we saw in the last 2 years. Everybody wants to do the right thing for especially the blue-collar workers, for the folks that are underprivileged. And we're seeing that being translated into the way contracts are written, into the benefits that are included from a compensation of blue-collar workers' perspective, and also in the way in which CSR programs are getting a lot more attention. We're starting to see a lot more focus being given, rightfully so, to the blue-collar workers. Long way to go, but I think the COVID situation has only heightened this, increased the sensitivity, like I said.
Okay, anything you'd like to add, Praveen?
Well, I think Sandeep mentioned most of it from a compliance and benefits and the awareness around it. From a salary or expectation, I think it's a question of the two things rather. One is that a lot of industry verticals are governed by the minimum wages as well, right? So there are minimum wages defined by the state governments or the central government, and people work on that. While individuals always want to have higher earning per day or higher earning per hour, right? So how do they can upskill themselves? Certain areas which are not governed by the minimum wages, it's governed by supply and demand, right? There is let's say a festival season coming and there's a huge demand for delivery boys. Suddenly the salary goes up for that month or the income goes up for that month, right? So there are different cohorts that you have to look at from that perspective. Expectation wise, of course, the expectation is always higher, and we have to create the environment of multiple opportunities to help people out more.
Okay, so last question. So what are the top talent identification skills for present and future? This is from Dr. Sri Krishna.
In the frontline workforce, Abid?
Yes.
So what we see in the industry right now, where are the growth levers are? I think logistics, warehouse, that's a huge lever right now that we see. We see huge lever coming from BFSI on the ground as well, be it insurance, be it banking, be it NBFCs. We see huge demand growing or back in demand in the retail sector as well. So there are or hospitality, so combined together with whether this is QBR and so on. Manufacturing is another sector. I think there is a huge shortage of supply right now, and that could be one of our bottlenecks in future if we have to take over a lot of manufacturing from China. And that's one area where we have to be absolutely aggressive. But overall, I think it's there in every area. I mean, I must say, I mean, there is no shortage of skills and demand, but these are the areas where we see higher growth happening right now.
I'll just add construction and real estate to that list.
Absolutely, Sandeep.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, audience, for asking so many questions. I think there are still some questions left, but I request all of you to please connect with Sandeep and Praveen on LinkedIn personal chat, so you can ask your questions, and I'm sure they will be happy to share their thoughts. And thank you, gentlemen, for taking out time and sharing your thoughts on this very important topic. We discussed a lot about gig workers, frontline workers, non-metro cities, the participation of women. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? I have my key takeaway will be what Sandeep mentioned and what Praveen mentioned. Sandeep mentioned about be comfortable with the gadgets, and what Praveen mentioned that about the environment that is very suitable for the non-metro workers. That's the reason they are very much keen to work in their selected geolocations. Thank you so much. It was wonderful hosting both of you, and it was a very learning and enlightening session as well. Thank you, Sandeep, and thank you, Praveen.